we're going to start now with our keynote, start a good day with a good keynote about what startups need to thrive in Africa. I think it's a very interesting topic for most of you. I've seen many startups here this morning, and the keynote is done by Hiba Sharif, CEO of Avoiro. Avoiro, that is very nice. I don't know if Hiba will talk about Avoiro for a few seconds in her keynote, but it would be interesting to know more about what Avoiro does and what you are doing through that. She's an accomplished leader. Hiba Sharif was named one of Silicon Valley's 2017 40 Under 40 and has been appointed as Women in Africa Ambassador for Sudan, since she's Sudanese-Lebanese and probably Tunisian very soon. We adopt you, Hiba. So the floor is yours. Let's make some noise for Hiba. Our first keynote of the day: how do startups thrive in Africa? Or do you want to do it here? Like okay.
Testing.
Yes, there you go.
Good morning, everyone. Are you guys awake? I know it's a little early. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm here to talk about what startups need to thrive in Africa. So I think a part of that, and thank you very much for the introduction. Again, just to reintroduce myself, Hiba Sharif. I'm a technology executive. I'd like to consider myself a global thought leader. And I have a very, very broad and diverse background in consulting services, in digital transformation, in technology. And I am passionate about the empowerment of youth, the empowerment of women, and the closing all the gaps in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, right? So I am originally from Sudan, Africa. I was born in Qatar. I've lived and worked in more than 40 countries around the world. And I'm living in Silicon Valley today. I am excited about bridging the gap between Silicon Valley, this, I would like to say, quite overrated ecosystem, right? There is top talent everywhere in the world, especially on this side of the world. I think there are tremendous opportunities for Africa, and especially for countries like Sudan, where I'm from, that have finally, that are finally ready to join the world stage, I'll say. You saw Tirhal yesterday from Sudan, a very successful company that is now ready for Series A funding. And we're very, very excited to see that. And I'm here to talk about Africa, but really what it takes to thrive in this ecosystem. So just like a product, when you're designing a product, you need to understand your audience. And you need to understand all the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the threats, right, etc. So when we talk about Africa, we have to first talk about what Africa needs. Number one, I think, personally, because I am the daughter of a diplomat, I understand the value of perception, right? And even in investing, perception is reality. The market will change. The price of a stock will change based on perception. And one of the challenges we have, well, there's a challenge that we bundle Africa like it's a country. Africa is huge, and I think part of it is Africa is not a single place, so the perception that Africa is a nation has to change. But perception is reality. Therefore, we have to focus on the perception of Africa as a land of poor people, as a land where dangerous animals roam the streets and we have no power and no internet and no big cities and no education and no talent. So that's one. We also need to focus on the local talent, right? Talent is everywhere. We need to focus on local talent and local problems, right? We have our own sets of challenges and problems here. We've heard about some of them in the unconference, as well as yesterday's session. And we have to stop trying to fix somebody else's problems because we want to make a lot of money and become unicorns in America. And we need support from local investors. no continent has thrived with external support. We continue to only focus on funding from outside. But when you look at some of the richest people coming from our continents, I'm Sudanese. Mo Ibrahim is a Sudanese man. Everybody knows Mo Ibrahim. So we have extremely wealthy individuals. And so we should be able to get local support from local investors to fund our startups. And finally, the rest of the world is focusing on the fourth industrial revolution. If the first one was steam, and the second was electricity, and the third was internet, we are now in Africa trying to leapfrog. And we need to focus on the second, the third, and the fourth all at the same time. And we're going to go the same way that we went from no one has a landline to everyone has fiber optic, and the guy that herds cattle has a cell phone, right, a smartphone. We're going to have to do the same thing as it relates to these industrial revolutions, right? And so this is what Africa needs in a big summary. But ultimately, we have been known to be a nation. See, I did it myself. we have been known to be a continent that consumes technology, and we have to change that to one that creates technology. Which brings me to the definition of a startup. So, a startup in our part of the world, I find that people are just creating small companies and saying, I have a startup. A startup is not a startup if it's not enabled by technology. And there are lots of definitions. Matsi yesterday was asking, or 2 days ago, was asking about startups and what is your definition in Tunisia of what a startup is. And I think that's critical. If we're talking about the Startup Act, I think it's critical to define what a startup is. But ultimately, a startup is not just a small business, because a startup may start small, but as a startup goes through Series A, B, C, D, and is ready to IPO, it could be as large as the largest enterprise and still be considered a startup, right? At some point, the PayPals and the Facebooks of the world were all startups before they IPO'd. And so we can't say that a startup is a small business, and not every small business is a startup. And one of the challenges we have here is anybody that creates a little shop says that I have a startup. They'll say, they'll create a little boutique and say, I have a startup. And we have to change that meaning so that we are actually using the same word the same way across the globe. So similar to what Africa needs, what do startups need? We need the support of the public sector, specifically when we talk about the public sector. Some people think the Startup Act is merely policy, right? But the Startup Act actually has bits and pieces of every single one of these quadrants in the circle. The public sector support piece is the regulatory components, the policy changes that have to happen to support startups. Again, most of our laws in Africa were created a very, very long time ago. Some over a century ago, some by the British that we perhaps adopted, or the French, or whoever else. And at the time, this concept of a small business, a startup, a technology-enabled business that scales from one country to another with talent from across the globe didn't exist. Like it's a newer thing. And so we need to focus on policy. We need to focus on the financial policies. I know that in Tunisia is quite a big deal. And we also need to focus on talent development. It is not the government's job to create jobs, but it is the government's job to enable and to help develop the talent. And this is where the public education system helps. We are transforming across the world, but we are not transforming our education system as at the same rate or at any kind of rate, actually. Most of our education systems have not changed since they've been implemented a long time ago. And talent development starts with the schooling system and innovation-friendly laws. Some people think innovation is technology. Innovation is not technology. Innovation is a mindset. Innovation is being able to try new things and fail. But if a country puts in some laws that make it impossible to even start a company to try to innovate, two things are going to happen. If it's too expensive, then they're going to do it, as we say, under the table, right? And no one's going to know that we have a company, we have employees, because we're going to pay them under the table. And that's really detrimental to any government, because they won't be able to collect taxes from a company that they don't even know exists. So innovation-friendly laws means I have to make it easy to start companies. I have to make it easy for them to attract talent. And if I look at countries like Bahrain, Avoiro actually decided to, or chose Bahrain versus Dubai as a place for its headquarters in the Middle East because of the government's support for the startup ecosystem and the support for talent development with organizations they've created like Temkeen. So this is a critical part. Startups also need private sector support. Private sector are people with money. They're the people with jobs, right? So we need funding and grants from the private sector. We need to work together in partnership and collaboration. The private sector is also our list of consumers, right? We need a pipeline of people and customers, and we need a pipeline of talent from the private sector. So nothing here. This is one of our big challenges, is access to resources. We need market research, we need insights, we need education and training, right? Entrepreneurship boot camps, but really the kind of training we need is training that is less technical, less focused on things you can learn in a classroom, and more experiential training, more the leadership training that I'm talking about is organizational change management. How do I transform a nation that thinks a certain way and help them see something different? How do I take a group of farmers that have only seen traditional farming and teach them agri-tech and drones and IoT? How do I do that with a digitally illiterate population to start learning how to use a GPS? This is a challenge we have, by the way, right? The GPS location on a map, when I say, come here, and then I don't have to get a phone call that says, just can you come where the pin is located, right? And so those frustrations is that we have to educate our consumers, the private sector as well, because startups can't work if we don't look at the entire ecosystem. And finally, expert guidance. When I look at my own success, I know very specific people that contributed to that success. Those mentors, those supporters, right? The coaches, they play a critical role. And so mentorship is very important, but the expert guidance I'm talking about is not every lawyer knows how to deal with a startup. Not every accountant knows how to create a financial plan for a startup. And so what we need is help to get people investor ready. We have many, many companies out there that are Series A traction, but are nowhere close to investor ready. They don't know what a data room is. They don't know what a pitch deck is. They don't know how this ecosystem works. They don't know what a SPAC is or what Series A even means, and the difference between seed and pre-seed and Series A, right? And so investor readiness is, from a startup perspective, there's some education that has to happen, which comes back to access to resources, but also the expert guidance, because you can learn all about basketball by reading a book about it, but until you actually get on the court and dribble the ball, and right, you can't really imagine what it's like to play basketball. And then we need actual support from people who understand this ecosystem, right? So every startup needs this, whether or not you're in Africa or in the US or in Asia. And Christophe and others have provided a lot of data over the last 2 days for us on how we're doing as compared with the rest of the world. We definitely have some support, but we have gaps across each of these 4 areas, major gaps across each of those 4 areas. And we can sit there and say, oh, well, yeah, we have gaps and we can't succeed. Or we can say, we have not yet succeeded. What does it take to succeed? How do I identify the key gaps across these areas and solve them? How do we prioritize them and solve them, right? And so for me, public sector support, what can we do about public sector support? What can we do about private sector support, etc.? And so what I want to do is, I want to go through each one. And let's talk about what it takes to thrive with a focus on what we can control, right? Because we said we can't control our foreign policy and exchange rates and all of that, because that's controlled by the market, right? We can't control our geopolitical situation and the security of the country and demonstrations and whenever they happen and all of that stuff. But these are things we can control. And so from a private sector standpoint, we need to articulate our value proposition, not individually as companies, but as a startup ecosystem, right? So what is the value of the startup ecosystem in changing the nation's economy, GDP, jobs, unemployment rates, right? So this is our responsibility. We need to develop our own IP. Can we stop trying to build things by hiring people from India on Fiverr, right, to build an app? And even if we do, don't tell too many people about it, right? Go do it, and then try to do it again yourself, so that it's your intellectual property. Ultimately, that's what is the value of a startup. If it's something that I can't call my own, then it's somebody else's company, it's somebody else's code. Stay asset light. Mohammed Karrar from Launch Africa yesterday was saying that some of the key criteria to easy scaling is that you are asset light. You can't scale if you need a ton of capital to scale. So focus on things that need less capital and the flexibility to scale across nations even, if not within country. Focus on investor readiness activities early. Don't wait until you have Series A traction to learn about what it's going to take. A lot of people don't understand that it takes a very long time. By the way, this takes a very long time at every stage of the process. My expertise is in taking a company from seed and pre-seed through what I call its awkward teenage years to IPO, right? And the hardest is actually the last part, to get IPO ready, right? It takes a lot longer at the later stage than it does at the beginning. But even at the beginning, people, most of you are at the very early stages in seed and pre-seed and Series A. And if you think it's a lot of work now, trust me, you don't know what's coming. And I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm saying practice makes it easier. So start early. Even if you don't think you're going to fundraise, a startup CEO, the majority of their time is spent in front of investors and learning how to present their pitch, learning how to refine their pitch, learning how to refine their value proposition, right? So start early. And partnering with others and co-creation is critical. You have an opportunity right now to start thinking creatively about how to work together. Stop trying, first of all, a good VC will invest in a company that has a co-founder before they invest in a company that has a single founder. So stop trying to say, I can do it on my own. No one understands the breadth and depth of that table, right? I call it the table. Who's got a seat at the table? And no one has the breadth and depth of every single seat at that table. And so, number one is we can control understanding our strengths and identifying the next group of people or the right group of people at the table, because that's what we look at, especially early on. We don't care how successful your product is. We care about your ability as a co-founder to know what your strengths are, to know what you don't know about yourself and about your product and market, and find those gaps. And if you can't afford it, to let us know that you don't know, and that's why you need the money to close these gaps, right? So that's really what we're looking at. In the early stages, we look at the team. Now, resources. A lot of people build products, and I don't know, I think they're just eager to become unicorns. And they focus on a market that's not theirs. So know your market, this market. The Tunisian market, know this first. Create a product that solves your own problem. Start by asking, what is the problem we are trying to solve? Here first. Who's creating platforms that solve some of your currency issues? Or whatever other issues that we have, right, with collaboration. Understand not just your customers, but your market. Is your market Tunisia? Is your market Tunisia plus plus? Is it North Africa? Is it the MENA region, right? So define your market, understand it, and know its needs. And yes, there isn't sufficient data, but there are plenty of folks that are starting to derive data. I call them the two Maxes, right? But Max and Max are actually working on a lot of data. We have to start crowdsourcing and templates, right? The digital collective has put together a lot of crowdsourced templates. We need to start using them and increase your knowledge and awareness about the stuff you can read about, your industry and so on, but understand your competition. Stop saying your competition is Etsy in America. They're not here. They're not your competition just yet. You can say there's a risk that when they want to come into the market, they will become your competition, right? But your competition is who is in your market competing for your customers, right? And how tech is disrupting your industry. Even when you have a startup, what are you doing in terms of understanding disruptive technologies, AI, machine learning, right? And understand leadership. And then finally, expert guidance. Be proactive, reach out to your peers and leaders. Attend and participate in networking events. This is a networking event. This is where you learn the most. And focus on non-technical skills. Laws are critical, and some of the guidance I always give is for people to participate. People don't even know they can participate in policy. It is your responsibilities as a startup ecosystem to participate on policy, engage social media, right? It's a very powerful tool. We've all seen it work when it comes to revolutions about changes in price. And so why are there no revolutions about the entrepreneurship ecosystem, right? And support female and youth empowerment. This is an under-leveraged sector or group of people. And Africa, more than 70% of Africa is under the age of 30, right? And so if we don't do something, right? So if I was to talk about Africa, if we don't do something, we are growing at such a fast rate that if we don't do something with this population that's going to nearly double by 2050, we are going to have 100 million people in Africa without jobs. And so if we have all of these volatilities with conflicts that are going to happen, and we have such a young population, what are we doing? We can't wait for the government to update the school system, right? Let's build edtech companies that are going to focus on the right things and are going to focus on our problems. And then finally, I know, Wasim, you were asking about Avoiro. So Avoiro is something I founded after a long career working in Big Five consulting and on Wall Street at Lehman Brothers. And I had a few things in mind when I had thought up of this thing. One is, people call it a company. It's not really a company. It's for me, it's, you know, I'm in that self-actualization, the top of the pyramid, right? In the Maslow's hierarchy of needs at this point. This is my self-actualization piece, right? Everything, we hear about all these leaders that talk about people. Everything is driven by people, yep. But community is what's really important. This is a community. We might not have met each other before, but we are a community. We are leaders, right? We have the ability to drive change. We are global leaders, right? And then separately, what I learned is that you can focus on making rich people richer, but it's so much more rewarding when you focus on making profits and driving profits while improving people's lives. We are privileged in this room. You might all think you have it really hard, but you don't, right? You don't. And billions of people would do anything to be in your shoes today. And so we have an obligation to drive innovation, right, and do all this cool stuff while improving lives. It is so much more satisfying. And so ultimately, we each have a role to play in that part of the ecosystem. I hate that word. Can we call it a value system, right? We have a shared set of values, and our values are to drive innovation, to create products and services while improving lives. If we can each do something that touches someone, when we are creating products, and we touch the emotional part of an investor, right? And we can actually prove that our customers or our end users are gonna want this product because of that emotional attachment. We're all human, huh? How do we use this people, the psychology of human beings, and focus on that? There's psychology of color, right? There's psychology of everything that helps us kind of sell things. Investors, they want to know that you're going to make money. But if they feel that you understand your market and you're doing all of those things, you can thrive anywhere and not just in Africa, right? Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Q&A, sure.
Yeah, sure. I think it's, thank you very much for this presentation, and I promise I will never call it ecosystem again.
Thank you. It's a value system. If we can make that happen,
exactly.
Just change. We have the opportunity to change it now.
So let's see how the value system here reacts to what you were listening to. Any questions? You will have to ask questions. Okay, there's one there. We'll take a few, and then, or maybe you can do
absolutely.
back and forth as you
Please.
like. We have coffee this morning.
Not all at the same time now. Okay.
No, there's one already.
John, here we go.
No.
I can repeat the question. Go ahead, John.
Go ahead. Pipe chart. I fully agree with the pipe chart you mentioned. However, I want maybe to capitalize on something that the public sector, it's not only about our country, what they are doing. It's also about all these international organizations that are interested to invest in something similar. Maybe not to invest, but to support. So in Lebanon, what we used to have before, companies, I used to work in talent development. So companies used to come to us, and we were doing their trainings, capacity building, consultancy. But now these companies cannot afford having consultants or trainers anymore. So we're going to the donors like USAID, GIZ, the European Union, and we're telling them, guys, we have a great project and that might create jobs, and you will create value in the country, you'll get fresh dollars into Lebanon, the situation might be better in a few years. So we're getting money from them, we're getting teams of consultants and experts, and then they are doing the job. So it changed a little bit, like without going definitely through our public sector, because it's a total mess. So we're doing it the other way around.
And sorry,
Actually,
John,
there is
the
no
question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I feel like the answer is going to be shorter than the question.
No, but is the question that should you go to the non-profit or NGO?
Yeah,
I honestly think that's not what solves the issue. Mm-hmm. So you're still asking for a handout at the end of the day. Even the process, by the way, of getting a grant and getting great, like they will invest. But our goal as a nation, right, as Tunis, is not to ask for handouts, right? Our goal is to get Tunisian diaspora, Tunisian local folks, to invest in their own country, right, and to get local funding. Believe me, I'm half Lebanese. There are plenty of very wealthy Lebanese people outside of Lebanon who can really turn Lebanon around.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to add one small thing. From my point of view, it's not asking for help, like ما بعرف. In Lebanon now, it's super trendy. Humanitarian support for everyone. Like, it's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like companies now, some of the companies are thriving to continue to live in a crisis, like in Lebanon, like in Sudan, like in many other countries in Africa. So what I'm seeing, like these big international organizations are somehow interested to provide talent development instead of going to ask the public sector to do it. So in some case, whenever we're out of fund, okay, it could be an option. But I can totally understand the diaspora. But for the Lebanese diaspora, they will never understand that talent development is a must.
Yeah.
It was super difficult for us, at least, to pitch it. Okay, now I will stop.
Thank you.
Susie? Here. You can, so she can see.
Yep, go ahead.
No, she's coming with the mic.
Oh.
A second. Okay. My voice is pretty loud. I know that.
We love it.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Hiba. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. My name is Susie, and I work for iCompass, an AI and NLP startup here in Tunis. I recently came back from the US, and I am a diaspora. The co-founders are also diasporas who came back to Tunisia to start their startup. And there's a bunch of us here in this room that have lived abroad and came back to actually start things from Tunis, for Tunis, and for the world.
Awesome.
Here's my question. In many countries in Africa, there is some sort of a support system from the government to encourage diasporas to invest and to encourage diasporas to come back and create value from within. How do you suggest, as diasporas who've already come back, we influence the public sector, if you will, or put some pressure on the public policy side to activate some more of these advantages or incentives to bring back diasporas and diaspora money? So your suggestions and your recommendations would be welcome.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. That's a wonderful question. So number one, so my full-time job is actually, I'm a senior leader at Amazon Web Services, which is an AfricArena partner. And I'll tell you, AWS, or Amazon actually, has a wonderful process that they use, right? Where everybody's on the same playing field because they're a writing-focused organization. So the government works with papers and documents. Number one, you need to pull together your ideas, your thoughts, into what is called a narrative. Go research how Amazon runs narratives. You need to work backwards, just like Amazon. There's a really great book that just came out called Working Backwards. And use the power of writing, either a 2-pager or a 6-page narrative, they're very different, to document the problem, to document the solution, right? It's about providing options and solutions. So write it down, because when you write, it's so different. You think you have it and you think you know that, but when you write, you have to, it's got to be read and understood. And ask for peers to contribute to that document and take that document to the government. Now, the public sector may or may not do something. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to do it yourself. This is where the nonprofit world comes in. This is where the diaspora can come together, because in Sudan, we have folks like Sudan Next Gen, led by Sally Lata. She's brought together all the Sudanese, I can't say all, but so many of the Sudanese diaspora, grouped them into sectors and verticals by geography and incredible talent. That we now have a pool of people across the globe, right? That's a great startup if you can put a tech component behind it, right? But even if you don't, it's a great nonprofit organization that maybe you do it and then ask the public sector to support, right? So there are many, many ways to do this, but it starts by putting your ideas on paper, getting the support of key people in your diaspora. Find the successful ones. They're probably known. Not the Mo Ibrahims of Tunis, right? But find successful folks, like the Hibas of Sudan, right? And put enough of them together to take this and make it either a policy, right? And you have support. You have support from international organizations. They may be based in South Africa, but they care about Tunis just as much as you do. And so put it in writing. I will personally support you and make it move to the next one. We have time for one more question.
One more question.
All right. Maybe.
Go.
Go ahead.
Thank you. It was very interesting. I'm very interested in the part of regarding market research and insight, regarding the region as a whole. How do you do, for instance, when you don't have access to data? How do you do that? How do you actually do it to collect it? In Lebanon, we've been trying to do it for a while, not only for the creative industry, but also in the tech. And it's so hard because nothing exists. Like, we have nothing to start with. So my question is, maybe in Tunisia or other local markets, I'm sure you had the same problem. How does it work? Give us tips, because we're very interested.
Thank you, Lise. Thank you. So one, we can't say it doesn't exist, right? There's plenty of data. Whether or not it's good data, or it's complete data, or it's relevant to our industry or our whatever it is, right? Our market or our customers. So again, I'm going to go back to what data do we need, right? How do we get it? Like, we literally have to create a plan, just like, you know, so let's say this is a problem statement. We have a challenge with data. How do we document the problem we're trying to solve and map all the providers of data, all the gaps that exist, and start to create these mastermind groups, I call them, right? How do we create groups of 12 in a room, whiteboarding, brainstorming, ideating, right? I was talking to John yesterday about human-centered design, right? And design thinking. The concept is, we have to find ideation people. Not everybody enjoys this process. I'm a problem solver, so I'm the kind of person that like wants to sit there and problem solve. Find the people to problem solve by country. Let's stop bundling Africa as a nation, right? Tunis, Lebanon, right? Yeah. But the data is also data about the cross-border demand and supply. How do we expand from one to another? We can't rely on government. Don't get me wrong, we need the government. The government enables, but we have the power to build the data, right? There's plenty of data out there. What does America do? America gets data from every single app that they use. So we have tons of apps. We have all these rideshare apps across all of our nations. You are in Tunis, we're using Bolt. Who went to Bolt and said, where are people going and why? Like, you know, so there's data in everything that is used today. There's data when somebody walks into a mall, somebody is capturing that information, right? And so let's understand our market and understand where the data is today that we can actually tap into. The telcos have data. Everybody's got a cell phone. What are they doing to monetize or understand, right, and capture this data? Let's ignore the census that's not happening correctly and the data that the public sector has today, and let's try to build our own data sets. And I think part of that is, who are the experts? Who are even the startups here? What are their sectors, right? So the data exists, it just needs some focus. If that helps, I hope it answers.
Yeah, no, I agree, because they actually asked us to provide the data for all the creative individual and registered entities in Lebanon, but in return, we asked 3 other big data providers in Lebanon to do so, and unfortunately, they're not sharing it, either in creatons or in ideation stages, because they're afraid, or I don't know why the reluctancy, but at the end of the day, there's not so much sharing, as you said. So I was just wondering if it was just
So
local.
that's a different problem statement.
Still have a second, by the way.
Yeah, that's a different problem statement. The data exists, but it's not being shared, is a different problem statement than there is no data, right? And so each problem has to be defined as a separate problem, and each one needs its own set of solutions. And unless we start thinking about them in a very structured way and putting plans together with accountable owners, we're just going to be complaining, there's no data, there's no data. Like, so what? There's no data. Let's go create data. Let's go find data. Let's go talk to people one at a time and get data, right? So I don't believe in the fact that like anything is a blocker, right? We just have to identify those things, prioritize them, just as we did, and just get them done. Great. Thank you so much,
Thank
everyone.
you, Eva
All right,
Sharif.
cheers.